here as we memorialize the war dead of wars present and past. People who are less familiar with the activities of the Smedley Butler Brigade and Veterans for Peace in general know that activists do a variety of things in the interest of peace, both in our community and in the world, and also the inner peace of each other. Our friends and colleagues, family members. So we will begin the program now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here this afternoon on a day that I know is deeply sacred and meaningful for many of you who have lost beloved friends and comrades and family members to war. On a day that should be sacred for all of humanity. Today I think of a colleague of mine, the Reverend Chris Antal. Chris Antal is a United States Army chaplain. He happens to be from the same faith tradition I am, Unitarian Universalist. He decided he was called to be an Army chaplain after 9/11. Though he himself is a pacifist, he thought perhaps it was a way he could serve in some capacity. He was stationed in Afghanistan, and there he became very aware, among other things, of our indiscriminate drone policy, of our indiscriminate killing with drones, not just in obvious places like Iraq and Afghanistan, but also Pakistan and Yemen and Libya and on and on. And although it is terrorists who are targeted theoretically by our drones, we know that many civilians are killed in the process. On Veterans Day in 2012, he wrote a Veterans Day confession, citing the sins, if you will, that all Americans are complicit in our drone policy. And for writing this confessional prayer, which I shared with you on a Veterans Day a few years back, he was in fact discharged from active duty. He was sent from active duty back to the States, and he served there in a small upstate New York town in ministry, but he was still in the reserves. Finally, I think of him this year because just last month he decided he no longer wanted to be officially associated with it, and he in fact formally resigned his commission as an officer in the United States Army. And he wrote this letter to President Obama just last month. Dear Mr. President, I hereby resign my commission as an officer in the United States Army, which continues to claim extra constitutional authority and impunity from international law. I refuse to support this policy of imperial overstretch. He writes, I resign because I refuse to serve as an empire chaplain. I cannot reconcile these policies with my sworn duty to protect and defend America and our constitutional democracy, or my covenantal commitment to the core principles of my religion. These principles include justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, a free and responsible search for truth, and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Respectfully submitted, Christopher John Antal. It was incredibly brave of Chris, in my opinion, to write this letter. And I, for one, am very proud and more so appreciative that he took that risk.
Speakers, our first speaker is Nicole Waybright. She's a U.S. Navy veteran, and she's going to speak to what Memorial Day means to me. Thank you, Nicole.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nicole Waybright, and I am a U.S. Navy veteran. I have never spoken publicly on Memorial Day. It was a difficult decision for me to choose to participate in a Memorial Day event. I have many conflicting emotions as I stand here and speak. For decades, I have consciously avoided all tributes and ceremonies related to Memorial Day. I don't doubt these tributes and ceremonies are well-intentioned and heartfelt by those who offer them, but I have found that I can never bring myself to participate in them. I can't even watch them. You might be asking, why would a veteran feel so conflicted over a holiday that is intended to honor veterans? What troubles me is the value system of a popular type of patriotic ideal that is being forced upon us, which becomes especially apparent on a holiday such as Memorial Day. It is a value system based on an insatiable war machine, the war industry, the importance of invasion, and the glorified idea of dying in foreign countries, and stating that these values protect our freedoms. We honor those who have fallen with ceremonies, speeches, and pomp and circumstance, but yet we still keep sending military members as we stand here today overseas without much public critical thought and discussion of the wars we are engaged in. We use perfunctory phrases like protecting our freedom. Why do we have a celebration of Memorial Day and at the same time continue to send our young military members into questionable wars where they may very realistically become the fallen we honor next year on Memorial Day? Our government, the media, and our very culture press upon us the idea that death and sacrifice related to war is necessary. It may be unfortunate, horrific, and devastating, but nevertheless, it is argued, it is necessary. Sacrifice and dying for one's country, being a hero, these are held up as the highest orders of patriotism. Heroes are put in the spotlight, poems are written about this, songs are sung. The themes could traditionally relate the horrors of war, along with the notion that the suffering depicted is necessary and justified for a greater cause. And conversations about the victims of war are sidelined in favor of focusing on continuing the war at all cost. This has been illustrated time and again over the past 15 years that we have been fighting in the Middle East. We are living in a war culture it is painful to accept. We have collectively created a mythos in which the military is exalted to a nearly religious status. The military agenda, with its unique value system, has permeated every aspect of our culture. If you buy a soda at Subway, you can get a cup in camouflage which states support the troops and then Subway profits. You cannot get through a day without hearing that this or that business is actively supporting the troops. The Veterans Administration and services for veterans are non-stop topics at every level of government. Someone is being thanked for their service every time you turn around. We live in a new culture driven by militaristic themes. I wrote a book about my experience in the military, and I would like to read for you a short excerpt from my book, Long Way Out, that illustrates some of my conflicting feelings regarding Memorial Day. It is a true story that happened to me while I was in ROTC. This is the excerpt. I was deeply affected by the account of a World War II veteran who I had met in the grocery store. He was collecting money for wounded veterans. When I approached the older man, wearing his VFW member's cap, to drop a few dollars in his collection jar, I told him of my ROTC scholarship. He told me of his service in Italy during the war, when his unit's young lieutenant commanding officer ordered his enlisted men to remain on board their patrol boat while he jumped off the boat and swam over to some unexploded ordnance. Rather than his enlisted crew be killed, the young officer saved the lives of his men, perishing in the subsequent explosion. The elderly man in the grocery store had wanted to tell someone about the young officer and how he died, and I had been moved by his story. Despite my growing inner conflict over my role in the Navy and the Navy's role in the world, I still was moved by the veteran's account, And I wondered if maybe there were times, such as during World War II, when the reasons for war were more clear. Where was the line between supporting individual troops and supporting the wars in which those troops were fighting? That's the end of my excerpt. I just wanted to say that in literature, in war movies, and even now in memes and Facebook, there's an acknowledgement of the suffering of war, the devastation, the catastrophic nature of it. But where I see it falling short is the questioning and the unexamined patriotism that often comes from that. Because how can we criticize a war that's being fought by heroes? So the rhetoric obscures the message and us being able to examine what we're doing as a country. So I want to leave you with one last thought on this Memorial Day. Be courageous enough to ask, is our military involvement moral? Is it ethical? And are our reasons for war on philosophically solid ground? We must not be afraid to question, to be honest, and to have open dialogue. Instead of blindly accepting the values of our war culture, I would ask that we honor all victims of war by engaging in honest reflection about the wars we are fighting. That is how I believe we should honor our fallen brothers and sisters and all victims of war. Thank you.
Next are Brayton and Susan Shanley from the Agape Peace Community, who also have thoughts on what Memorial Day means to them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Our peace community is dedicated to nonviolence, faith-based, and to the abolition of war. And so for patriotic holidays, we have a tradition at the community. We either ignore the patriotic holiday and work hard, or we do something solemn, or we do something alternative. So on Independence Day, we have a day on interdependence. And for Memorial Day, we remember the deceased. I didn't have a chance to really see that. I think there is that saying where there's only two kinds of people that really know what Memorial Day is, and one are combat veterans, and the other are people that actually lost somebody in war. They always remember that come Memorial Day. And so that's where the solemnity starts. I didn't have a chance to see that growing up because I grew up in a suburb of New York, and the Memorial Day was the rite of spring. And everybody came out for the first town-wide thing that happened, a big parade, beautiful May Day. There's no solemnity at all. And then it's followed by a cookout. And I think of the poetry of Siegfried Sassoon. Suicide in the trenches. I knew a simple soldier boy who grinned at life in empty joy, slept soundly through the lonesome dark, and whistled early with the lark. In winter trenches, cowed and glum, with crumps and lice and lack of rum, he put a bullet through his brain. No one spoke of him again. You smug-faced crowds with kindling eye who cheer when soldier lads march by. Sneak home and pray you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. I had access to that hell with my father, who never spoke about war. He was with Patton at the end of the war, and he was in the Battle of the Bulge, 25,000 U.S. soldiers killed in 3 weeks. And he came in on the tail end of that. And he always spoke highly of Patton, but never talked about the details of war. Never talked about the details of war. And as a result, I never felt it. So I think we have to look at Memorial Day in the solemn and truthful way that we're doing today. I'm grateful for this kind of gathering. There are many more that could benefit from. I hope this tradition grows and gathers, because there's only really one reason for Memorial Day, and that is to remember the dead and to remember those who have died and the tragedy of their death, so that we end war. The purpose of Memorial Day should be from here on forward to end war. So let's, please God, help us to end the scourge of war.
So glad that part of the program had this beautiful Vietnam War Memorial, Women's Memorial. Because for me, also the daughter of a World War II veteran who spent 4 years in New Guinea and came home a broken man, whose PTSD was never treated, but whose alcoholism destroyed our family, who always talked about the Japs, who brought out all the little mementos he picked up, including little bomblets. And all of this shaped who we were as children. So the victims of war, disproportionately in the entire planet, are women and children. So Memorial Day means to me the suffering of the men, of course, who serve and who have to deal with the after effects of their service, like my father, either through drink or drugs, but also all of the women, and the women who had the courage, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, all of the early women who spoke out against war and slavery and became the models of the abolitionist and anti-war movement. So Memorial Day means to me also the people that I knew who were part of the Smedley Butler Brigade. It means a long friendship with Tony Flaherty of over 15 years, and all that Tony meant to me as a mentor and as such an honest, beautiful human being. And Alden Poole, who was part of our community, and everywhere he went, wore his medals and spoke before thousands of high school students and hundreds during his time of working with our community. And the moving way he spoke about his experience, as many of you know, of coming across the body of a dead German soldier. And today, Memorial Day means something very significant because we were just at Daniel Berrigan's funeral and wake. And it was quite moving to see all the anti-war memorabilia all throughout the church, especially Dan and Phil with their homemade napalm burning the Vietnam draft records. And then Liz McAllister, Philip Berrigan's wife, speaking about the fact that the words that Daniel, as the poet, felt were the only words that could express what was happening in Vietnam, was the land of the burning children. And how eloquent Dan was in putting those words into the anti-war life that he led. But more importantly, Philip, World War II pilot like Howard Zinn, the total transformation and interior change that many of you, whom we love and respect here today, have had. So these are the words of Daniel Berrigan. We have assumed the name of peacemakers, but we have been by and large unwilling to pay any significant price. And because we want the peace with half a heart and half a life and will, the war, of course, continues, because the waging of war by its nature is total. But because the waging of peace by our own cowardice is partial. So a whole will and a whole heart and a whole national life bent toward war prevail over the mere desire for peace. And so one way we have chosen to not simply have the desire for peace, but to actively be peacemakers, is that we have chosen not to pay war taxes. And therefore, for the last 40 years, not 1 cent of our money as a community or a family has gone to support any war, any killing, any death, anywhere. And you give us courage and hope to continue that non-cooperation. And I want to acknowledge Sabah Kader, who's here, a longtime supporter of Veterans for Peace, whose family was bombed in Iraq and whose wife was killed. And I would like to remember today his wife, Suad, and their two boys, Ali and Omar. So a moment of silence for an Iraqi victim, Suad, wife of Sabah. Thank you.
I would like to thank all of the speakers I've heard so far. I just feel very inspired to keep on keeping on, and I believe we have to become a nation of peace. It would be so wonderful. We must become a nation of peace. This song is called Strangest Dream. It'll help you imagine having become a nation of peace. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw
speak on Let Us Be the Winds of War No More.
No, the other one. Yeah, that's it.
Too low? There you go.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to see so many people here, and I think today I want to talk a little bit about the ringing of bells, the tolling of bells. One of the deepest human feelings, especially on Memorial Day, is the sound of bells tolling. In 2005, I attended the Hiroshima 60th anniversary commemoration, and at that time, it was a moment of silence at 8:15 a.m. in the morning, when the first atomic bomb was dropped upon a mainly civilian population. The ceremony was very solemn. 60,000 people speaking in whispers. An orchestra played a funeral dirge. A mother and her young son rang a peace bell. An hour later, there was an arts festival in Peace Park in Hiroshima. There were bells ringing there, happy bells. There were jazz musicians playing, hip-hop dancers, rock and roll, all kinds of things going on to commemorate this event, the 60th anniversary, and more so to commemorate the thousands of Japanese who threw themselves into the Motoyasu River to escape the heat of the bomb. Little did they know that the river was boiling. I couldn't help thinking, as I reflected on the ringing of bells, a poem by John Donne. Perchance He for whom this bell tolls may be so ill as that he knows not it tolls for him. And perchance I may think myself so much better than I am, as that they who are around me and see my state may have caused it to toll for me. And as one volume, when one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book, but it is rewritten, translated into a better language. And every chapter must be so translated. As therefore the bell that rings to a sermon calls not upon the preacher only, but upon the congregation to come. So this bell calls us all. But how much more me, who am brought so near the door by this sickness, this war. No man is an island entire of itself. Any man's death diminishes me, because I'm involved in humankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. This feeling was further brought to me about a year ago when a Japanese woman heard that I was making a film about the Japanese Constitution. The Japanese, incidentally, they love their own Constitution. Anyway, she heard that I was making a film, and she decided to embroider a banner for me. I never met the woman. I have no idea who she was. She sent it with a friend to New York. I met the friend in New York, and she gave me the banner. I take the banner wherever I go, and I let it ring. And it tolls. It tolls the bell for you, for thee. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Sue Serpa, an associate member of our chapter of Veterans for Peace, and she will speak Under God's Blue Sky.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm here to read a poem that my father wrote. He was a B-17 pilot in World War II, flew missions over Germany, and thought he was doing the right thing, and had afterthoughts for many decades after that on the whole war machine. And when he passed away in 2011, I discovered over 4,000 poems. Most of them were devoted to peace, and I'm reading my favorite today. Under God's blue sky, I know I shall lose my life, some 30,000 feet above, some German town, twixt drum and fife. I am not a hawk, nor yet a dove. The same is true of all my mates. We only joined the force to fly. None of us bore any hate for others under God's blue sky. Thank you.
Thank you. So, before I start, Memorial Day is billed as remembering those who've been killed in war. But we also really need to remember those who have been injured in war on many levels, and those who've been wounded, those who are disabled, those who suffer from PTSD, those who are in jail, those who are at the New England Center for the Homeless. You know, these are all our Iraqi friends who have lost an enormous amount. these are all victims of war, and that's what Memorial Day means to me, and also those who have committed suicide. I personally lost 2 of my close friends to suicide, plus I've lost friends to war. So, but just to keep that in mind, it's much broader than just those who've died. It's those who've suffered and been injured by war. I'll just take a couple minutes to give a little background on this, but I need 2 things. I need everyone here to go to Kickstarter. Everybody familiar with Kickstarter? If you're familiar with Kickstarter, raise your hand. If you're not familiar with Kickstarter, raise your hand. Maybe that's the easier way to do it. Okay, this is a fundraising site that groups have, or people have projects, and they put it up on the site, and you raise money to support your project. So I would ask everyone here to go to Kickstarter. When you go to Kickstarter, type in Extremists for Peace Music Project, and a 3-minute video will come up. There's pictures and there's a narrative, and take a look at our project, and if you are so moved, contribute to the project. We need to raise a lot of money to make this happen. And Eric mentioned, thank you for the plug, by the way, Eric, wherever Eric went, our event at the mosque. When we did the event at the mosque, Barry Ladendorf, who's the president of Veterans for Peace, stayed at my house, as did Regis Tremblay, who was a filmmaker and from Maine, and he stayed for a night. Barry stayed for 3 nights, and Regis likes my stuff. Anyway, Regis asked if I would play him a song. Well, okay. So I went. Now, to back up, before that, whenever we're out on the street, we have in any kind of demonstration, any time of march or whatever, and that goes for environmental groups, social justice groups, peace groups. There are people taking pictures and filming us. The ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild, after 9/11, they were formed what's known as fusion centers, all connected to Homeland Security, right? And there's 75 fusion centers, or regional intelligence centers around the country. There's 2 in Massachusetts, 1 in Springfield, and 1 in Boston, known as the BRIC, Boston Regional Intelligence Center, located at the Boston Police. Well, the ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild wanted to know what was the extent of surveillance of peace groups. So they asked the BRIC, and were ignored. Then they filed a Freedom of Information Act, and were ignored. And then they sued them in federal court. I was personally named as a plaintiff in that case. I was coordinator of the Smedleys at the time, as was the Smedley Butler Brigade, Code Pink, and Mass Peace Action. They got all this stuff. We went to the ACLU's office. What? Went to the ACLU's office, and we looked at the stuff. One of the reports, it described us. It was Veterans for Peace, an extremist organization, blah, blah, blah. I went home, I was very disturbed by that, and I wrote a song. They call us all extremists because we're out here in the street. How unpatriotic. Veterans for Peace. They say they gotta watch us like never before because there's nothing more dangerous than veterans against war. Barry heard that song and he said, "Where is this, Pat?" I said, "It's in the kitchen." He said, no, do you have it on a CD? Do you have it? I said, no, it's right here in the kitchen. I said, I've done nothing with it. He said, we got to do something. This could be the theme song for Veterans for Peace. And then it went on, and we had to figure out how much. It's going to cost $9,000 to record the song, and we're in the process of recording the song and doing the film. And I said to Barry, I said, I'm not going to pull the trigger on this unless I get commitments of $4,000. The Smedleys committed $1,000, as did some others. So I hit the $4,000, and it's a project. It's real. But we need support. So please, and the other thing we need is next week it's been recorded and the vocal has been laid down. So, and I need members of Veterans for Peace to come next Saturday on June 4th in Acton to Wellspring Sound to record the chorus. And then once we put that all together, it's going to go around the country to North Carolina, New Mexico, Southern California, Minnesota, Northern New Jersey, and New York. They are going to sing the song. We're going to take that footage and put it in, and then it's going to be, the grand release will be at the National Convention in Berkeley, California in August. But we need your help. We need your help in helping to sing this song and be part of this, and also to contribute, because we still need to raise a lot of money. Thank you.
Recognizing me and when not being part of the program. My name is Virginia Pratt. I'm a former chair of the Boston branch. We have several members of the Boston branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom here. We're a 101-year-old women's peace organization. We welcome men as members as well. We have chapters and sections all over the world. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom began in 1915 as an effort by women, more than 3,000 from over 32 countries, who came together to try to stop World War I from happening. Unfortunately, we still have our mandate. And one of the slogans, regrettably, that has not gone out of vogue or still has relevance, that WILF can claim, is that it will be a great day when our schools have all the money that they need and the Air Force has to have a bake sale to build a bomber. Thank you.
First class, Kenneth J. Iwanowski, Belchertown, Mass. CW3, Kieran B. Kennedy from Boston, Mass. Sergeant Gregory Anthony Bright from Boston, Massachusetts. Sergeant Marquise R. Porter from Brighton, Mass. Lance Corporal John J. Van Geisen from Bristol, Mass. Corporal Donald E. Fisher II from Brockton, Mass.
Captain Anthony Palermo, Brockton, Mass. Lance Corporal Gregory E. McDonald, U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, Burlington, Mass. Sergeant Alexander H. Fuller, Centerville, Mass. Corporal Andrew Zeinberg, U.S. Marine Corps, Chelmsford, Mass.